Look, I know this seems kind of sudden for the two of you, but can you at least meet me halfway here? I'm aware that the new location here is a bit jarring and it's not what you're used to, and I can respect that. But my life has taken a different direction, and that means changes. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not asking you to love this place. All I'm asking is that you bear with me for a couple of months and see how this place grows on you. And who knows, maybe you'll even wind up missing this place when we return back to the original set. So, what do you guys say?
I like the old set better.
We're in one piece!
Never change, guys. Many an anime and manga legend have come under the microscope here on Anime Abandoned. But though he has been brought up from time to time, I believe one luminary has gone on for far too long without a proper introduction. Kazuo Koike. A writer that has penned manga and films alike, Koike is one of the comparatively few pillars of the industry that made his name for his writing rather than his illustrative art. Cutting his teeth by writing for the Golgo 13 manga, Koike would go on to write dozens of other manga, and even penned a few books for Marvel. But his contributions to the industry stretches further than his bibliography. He helped the industry and medium grow by cultivating new artists by creating an entire college course to teach artists how to create manga. Called Gekiga Sanjuku, the program would help benefit and start the careers of many a creator, such as artist Tetsuo Hara, creator of Fist of the North Star, and Rumiko Takahashi. Yes, you could make the argument that because of Kazuo Koike, we would wind up getting this. But we won't hold that against him. But as far as Koike's impression on Anime Abandoned is concerned, well, the man gave unto us all this classic moment.
Right!
That's right, he created Mad Bull 34, and personally, I can't thank him enough. But while that is a moment in series that will live on as one of the most off-the-wall, gleefully insane chapters in anime history, it's not fair to assume Koike's work was all in the same vein as Mad Bull 34. After all, how on earth could anything be like Mad Bull 34? His was a career that commonly touched upon themes of revenge and violence, and often set in the distant past. For proof positive of this, look no further than what is probably his most famous work, Lone Wolf and Cub. It is no understatement that the 1970 manga would play a pivotal role in not only anime, but American pop culture as well. The story of Ogami Ito and his young son Daigoro's journey to take revenge for crimes perpetrated by the Yagyu clan is one that has gone on to influence a myriad of artists and writers. Frank Miller would homage the manga in his own comic Ronin, and writer Max Collins stated that his comic Road to Perdition was an homage as well. Even beyond comics, Lone Wolf and Cub has stretched its influence to the world of video games.
You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad.
Movies.
It doesn't surprise me that Oliver's into death metal. Look at his surrogate parents.
And even web series.
Stop touching things.
So why aren't we talking about the Lone Wolf and Cub anime? Because there never was one. Sure, there were over half a dozen movies and a live-action television show, but no actual anime. There was an attempt to kickstart a motion comic back in 2016, but it failed to meet its goal. According to an AMA on Reddit, Koike expressed interest in an anime adaptation, but it seemed that a lot was tied to the success of the Kickstarter. Sadly, Koike died earlier this year on April 17th, just a few days after Lupin the Third creator Kazuhiko Kato died, both of pneumonia. I didn't quite know how to honor the man when I first heard news of his passing because, as I said, the Lone Wolf and Cub anime just doesn't exist. And I already covered Mad Bull 34 like a decade ago. There were other anime adaptations of his work, but most of them never saw an official US release, save for Hanape Bazooka. But that was a collaborative effort with Go Nagai, and while the two men are veritable peas in a pod, it just didn't feel appropriate. Not to mention the fact that while it had a US release, ADV never gave it a dub. So, in the end, I was left with one option. And one option only. Released as 6 episodes over the course of 5 years and change, Crying Freeman is a 1988 OVA series that adapts Koike's manga of the same name. As it was a Toei project, the OVA was divvied up between 5 different directors, as well as a myriad of writers and animators, creating a series that, by the end of the run, doesn't even look like how it began. And yet, it still maintains that almost pristine feeling of what in the holy hell am I even watching? Yep, it's one of those kinds of anime.
You mean the awesome kind?
No, he means this kind.
Huh?
Ah, glorious day. It feels like we've time warped back to 2013. Actually, you're kind of right, Suave. Crying Freeman is the kind of ultra-violent schlock anime that once upon a time ago I probably would have done a full-blown rundown on, all the while being flabbergasted by the sheer amount of mystifying dumb moments that fall from it like crab apples in winter. Because there is a lot of them. Like, a lot of them. But as I said, I wanted to do this episode not just to point to the anime and scream. I actually want to try and dissect this. Yes, I am that dumb. Using Crying Freeman to talk about Kazuo Koike and his body of work is like using Dreamcatcher to talk about Stephen King and his body of work. Not their proudest moments, but at least Koike never wrote the term shitweasel.
What about the shit weasels?
But the needs must as the devil drives, and where we're going certainly feels like he would know the way like the back of his hand. This is Crying Freeman. Mild-mannered Yo Hinamura has been enjoying his life as a world-famous pottery artist until he happens to find a microfilm print of an assassination hidden in his pottery.
No, you listen to me. These photos are going straight to the police.
So, suppose you were part of a criminal organization and you were dumb enough to be a part of the conversation on the other end of the phone with Yo here. What do? Have him killed because obviously you have no compunction about killing people? Nah, that's exactly what he'd expect. What you should do is use acupuncture to hypnotize him into becoming your perfect assassin.
Do you want to be free, Freeman? Freeman, that would be your code name, my boy.
And to really twist the knife, you allow him to remember who he used to be and give him an ironic nickname. But why stop there? After he fails to assassinate a target that witnessed one of his assassinations because he fell in love with her, permit him to induct her into your criminal organization and make him your new head cheese, and give him total control of your operations, as well as your nuclear submarine, because apparently you're also Spectre. That'll teach him to go to the police. I can't even tell if I was speaking English in that last minute. Like, that's what happens. That's the general story of Crying Freeman, and, well, it certainly reads like the spiritual twin of Madball 34, doesn't it? Right down to the madcap decision-making and the buckets upon buckets of gore. But at the heart of this rat nest crazy plot, there is a lot more going on here, thematically speaking, than there ever was in Madball 34. It's just too bad that they handle those themes like it was Madball 34. Like, Madball tried to have something to say other than look at all the bodies that shithouse dropped like they were hot. Something about how the darkness that surrounds us can poison the soul or something like that.
New York feeds on human misery. Gradually, it sucks the life out of us. It's a monster.
Oh, blessed soul, it tried. Whereas Crying Freeman at least knew well enough not to wait until the very last scene of the last episode to actually say something, as the very nature of Freeman's existence is fraught with tough questions about the nature of free will and what makes us even human. Unlike the similar, at least in setup, Manchurian Candidate, the hypnotized assassin in question is aware that he has been hypnotized, thus is the case of his free-flowing tears.
Maybe it's a release and I come back to myself in that instant. I wonder if it's that sense of freedom that makes me shed the tears.
So with such a setup, you're expecting the story to be about him trying to regain his autonomy and thus reclaim his humanity. But nope, it goes in the complete opposite direction. In fact, the arc of his character is completely quashed by the end of the first episode, where he triumphantly burns down his own home and completely forsakes his former self, so that he might become a world-famous criminal overlord / assassin / Lothario, even to the point that a woman turns to a life of organized crime just so she might have the off chance to bone him.
Since the first moment I saw you, I've been your captive, your slave.
And you're saying it's a bad thing that he turned into a world-class ladies' man?
Yeah, who wouldn't want to be a legendary ass kicker?
Well, obviously Go didn't want to do it, otherwise what would be the use of this whole crying conceit? Sage. Crime boss that every man fears and every woman wants? Pottery artist. So if I have you two right, if you were abducted by the Chinese mafia and then hypnotized into losing your free will and become a puppet of their system, you'd be happy. Ecstatic.
I do it twice!
And why am I not surprised? The issue here isn't that he turns into the archetypal male power fantasy figure, it's that the story frames him becoming one as a tragedy. For about half an hour, and the rest of the time is spent praising Freeman as God's gift to women and Satan's curse toward any fool who dare get in his way.
These talents make him the man whom we, the 108 Dragons, wish to acquire by any means.
That young boy was as fast and as sleek as a leopard, could fly like an eagle, and outrageously handsome.
I don't think we should play Freeman for a fool. We're into this up to our asses, and he's the only one who can protect us now.
I'm sorry, but your attempts to try to get me to be in awe of him and his abilities is sort of ruined by the fact that he's not doing any of this of his own free will. If the intent was to undercut these moments of him kicking and tapping ass with a stark reminder of who he once was, then I would argue that it does a piss-poor job at doing so. Mainly because these moments are very few and far in between and mostly used to flourish the act of him killing. It's like the story actively doesn't get its own idea. I can't even remember the last time I saw anything butcher its own concept so badly. This disconnect stretches further into the supporting cast, which range from yikes to yikes. Freeman's target turned wife, Hu Qinglan, is one of the more immediate examples. The story builds the two up as these star-crossed lovers, seeing as how she essentially gives up her entire life to become the wife of a mafia boss, and he overcoming mental suggestion to stop himself from killing her, which is about as melodramatic as one could get. But disregarding a target when you're a hypnotized assassin that's been brainwashed into obeying your orders to the very letter, love at first sight only explains so much. There's gotta be another explanation here.
What you read in my diary is true. I'm still a virgin. Please love me before you kill me.
Truly, Cupid knows no truer love than this. And from there, the story of Freeman and Hu Qinglan plays out like a storybook romance, written by Takashi Miike. But all the constant flowery talk about their destined relationship and how much they mean to each other can't amount to anything if you don't buy it. And I'm not sure if that was intentional or not. Simply put, the stories of two minds when it comes to their relationship. On one hand, that purple prose drivel.
The dragon and a tiger are calling each other.
And on the other hand, it spends quite a lot of time trying to frame the relationship like it's a liability.
I'm not being cruel, but if we were like other lovers, too many people would try to take you hostage to get to me.
I mean, I get why it could be a liability, but if they're joining a criminal organization that wants to protect itself so badly that their leaders have to sterilize themselves so that the line of succession is decided by merit instead of bloodline, which in of itself is a whole other conversation, why would said organization even allow them to be married in the first place? Never mind the fact that Freeman's handler had to give him a bullshit test of metal to even get the chance to save her and therefore gain her hand in marriage.
You love her that much, do you? Answer me!
I have to go help her.
Who knew that the ruthless Chinese mafia would also respect the vows between husband and wife? And speaking of vows, if I were married to a man who would order his hired goons to kidnap me and also threaten to sexually assault me to test whether or not I would crack and sell him out to his possible enemies, I would at the very least begin to doubt his trust in me.
I want you to meet the men who tested you, and I can assure you that every member of the 108 Dragons is impressed. They all admire your courage.
And need I remind you that this is also a man who routinely has sex with other women behind her back. But at least he tells her about it.
Sage, have you ever considered that maybe it's her thing, you kink-shaming monster?
Suave, how many times do I have to tell you? Give it up. You're never going to find a woman like that as a girlfriend.
I will find that unicorn!
However, her attitude towards her husband's fickle pickle, as it were, does at least fit within what the story built for their shared dynamic. The central idea to the relationship is one of complementary duality rather than as a romanticized singular entity. Over and over again, the anime goes out of its way to clarify that they love each other, but they consider themselves separate people and live their own lives.
We're completely different from other people because we're the dragon and the tiger. Dangerous and independent.
In fact, one of the episodes culminates with one of Freeman's enemies pointedly asking him what in the world is up with their relationship.
And the women in your organization, do you expect them to give you their hearts and bodies too, the way your wife does?
That's right. And every one of the women knows it.
What is family? What is life? What is love?
I can't rightfully say that I've seen a couple like this in anime before, and it's at the very least interesting to see play out. But with that said, it's not like it's used to its fullest potential either. After all, while Freeman is out and about being cornered by sexy assassins and militia leaders, Ho Ching Lan goes out and purifies a cursed sword. Cool and everything, but nothing that couldn't happen in a by-the-numbers relationship. But hey, at least she's naked while she's doing it, which, you know, is her claiming her sexuality for her own? And her being naked as she attempts to save Freeman, that's her owning it too, maybe? I mean, what else could it be? Yeah, okay, I've been avoiding this question for too long. Why is everyone naked in this anime? I mean, it's certainly not for sex appeal for those inclined, for the most part, because not only are they not framed sexually half the time, it's also that it's not just all the femme fatales and Ho Ching Lan that are dropping trow. It's Freeman himself and other men, as well as the septuagenarian matriarch of the Mafia and Baya Shan.
That's a huge bitch!
Alright, even though the anime proper doesn't go into it, at least there's an explanation in the manga. Apparently, she goes into battle naked because it disorients her foes because they're repulsed by her body. And I kind of love that. No foolin', Super Chunk here stole my heart and ate it with a béarnaise sauce. She's obnoxious and childish, but also impervious to bullets while slicing up bean poles with her butterfly knives. I just love that juxtaposition of someone so unbelievably huge and bloodthirsty being so petulant and immature.
Time for all of you to fight the big one!
Though, her introduction of being an ungrateful grandchild who's mad at Freeman for taking over the Mafia when she felt that she had a birthright to it feels like a million light years away from where she winds up, as both his and Ho Ching Lan's personal bodyguard after he saves Super Chunk from falling.
I don't want to fight with a member of the family.
You lie! I'm so happy I could cry.
Apparently, Freeman's ungodly charisma points could help him sell a crate of Bibles to the Pope. And that's not even the most unbelievable face turn in this show. No, that belongs to Bugnug here, who goes from sworn enemy out for revenge to hot and heavy lover. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out how.
He didn't kill me even though he knew he could. Now I have the dragon's blood in me and he let me have it. Eternal life.
My God, I've been trying to use that pickup line for years and I've got zilch to show for it. My hat's off to you, good sir.
Well, that's what you get for getting a drunk tattoo.
I'm always drunk, and Pete's dragon is badass.
At the end of the day, I suppose you can wrap up every mystifying turn and character decision under the explanation of Freeman being the second coming of sexy perfect Christ, but to see all of these people willingly kowtow to someone whose want and needs really aren't his own anymore, it just comes off like the story really didn't think about this all the way through. And speaking of not thinking, it wouldn't be a Koike story if there wasn't a heaping helping of, well, this ain't okay. Spoilers, we're about to dive into some heavy topics, including some historical atrocities and race relations. So if you want out, go to the time code here. Okay. Despite the differences between Crying Freeman and Mad Bull 34, they share one particular thing. A MO, as it were. A distinct lack of accuracy, or caring I should say, when it comes to the portrayal of its setting or characters. The thought being, go with an idea no matter what the implications are, so long as it sticks. This attitude certainly wasn't unique to either anime, really. At the time, films like Death Wish and, well, about half of Canon Films' library operated much in the same vein. Criminals and cops alike blowing each other away in an urban environment. No thought given to how it might portray inner cities and the people therein, just glorious violence for the sake of it. The overlap between these movies and Mad Bull isn't a coincidence. Watching the anime really does feel like Koike's vision of New York City was informed by such films. Therefore, his vision of the Big Apple is one of constant urban warfare, drugs, and the assault of many a blonde.
Are you cold? I can always turn the heater on if you like, but the sound of the engine might attract attention.
But in Crying Freeman, the setting constantly shifts from Japan to Africa, and still it maintains this devil-may-care mindset. But with the added dimension of bringing a ton of national and racial baggage at the forefront of the story. And this is where the problems start. It's not lost on the Mafia that they ostensibly elected a Japanese man to head their Chinese organization, and much like how Boss Tanaka had a problem with Cottonmouth, so too does Elder Mercury have a problem with Freeman.
Shishinya, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot that during the Second World War, the Japanese army massacred every member of your family.
You forgot. You forget to turn off the stove. You forget your code at work. Hell, you could even forget about Dre. But how in the world does a Chinese man forget about the rape of Nanjing? Derailing and jarring as that sudden juke and turn was, as quickly as it was brought up, it just as quickly disappears with nary a follow-up. It was simply used as cheap character motivation for the episode to have a story. Again, I don't believe that this had any kind of malice or anything ulterior behind it, it's just that the decision was made without much in the way of thought. But depending on who you ask, that's just as egregious. From an American perspective, a slight like that might just go over our heads and we would be none the wiser, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something waiting for us in the eaves. Because later on in the exact same episode, Freeman is targeted by an assassin who seems utterly single-minded to his demise and has schemed a devious plan for his execution. I'm sure that you all have as many questions as I have, but I think for the sake of not letting this episode run on into next year, I think we need to whittle this down to the core issues here. The most pressing of which is why? Even if you tried to look at it as something contextually despicable that the villain of the day does because she's the villain, the question then becomes, what makes her the villain? All we really know about her is that she is a trained assassin and she wants to kill the protagonist, Crying Freeman. A trained assassin, who also just so happens to profit off of the drug trade as well as protection and extortion rackets. Sure, he would go on to become this kind of folk hero to the common man in Chinese slums, but at this point in the story, that hasn't happened yet. Is it just that since he has been brainwashed so his will is not his own is what makes him the wronged party here, and therefore the good guy? Really, all of this just goes back to my original point. The story just doesn't know what the implications are for every decision and turn it makes. It just thoughtlessly does it. It's what happens when someone tries to make Go-Go without understanding Go-Go. You know, like Zack Snyder. But then again, he used to write for Golgo. So where is this disconnect happening? And why does this matter so much? Especially when Mad Bull 34 was much the same in execution. Really, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the fact that Freeman tried to be more. When you really break down the story of Mad Bull 34, it's action schlock through and through, while Freeman is more along the lines of an action drama with tinges of soap opera melodrama and romance. Mad Bull wasn't trying to be anything more than that, for about 99% of the runtime anyway. But Freeman was trying to be headier, and its plot more thoughtful than anything in Mad Bull, and in doing so, its margin for error got thinner and thinner, to the point where failure was inevitable considering it shares Mad Bull's methodology. It's like trying to do open heart surgery while wearing boxing gloves. Despite all of its schlockiness, Mad Bull 34 is thoroughly entertaining, warts and all. And in some cases, it's entertaining because of said warts.
If you still want to run an expose on me, be my guest.
Whereas Freeman is just as schlocky, but instead of it being entertaining, it's just confusing and dreary. Oh, as I said, there are plenty of dumb, what in the world were they thinking kind of moments.
Would you be good enough to escort me to hell, Freeman? I'll sleep on my bed of tears.
And there is a character here and there that livens up the proceedings, but on the whole, the series really isn't worth these all too short moments of baffling guffaws. It just takes itself way too seriously, told with a sappy, dramatic air that it just does not earn, nor fits with the plot half the time. It's thoughtless in its execution without much in the way of cheesy charm to make up for it, the kind of Terabad anime that puts the bad on full blast. But, despite my feelings on the anime, I can't completely write off Crying Freeman's existence, because despite my thinking it's a hot pile of crap, it's still part of Kazuo Koike's work. That it, along with Mad Bull, remained the only anime of his available in print here in the States feels wrong for someone so invaluable to the industry. His was the foundation that helped shape the world of manga and anime as it is today, and his presence is sorely missed. My one hope is that with the success of Osamu Tezuka's Dororo series from earlier this year, we might finally get an honest-to-God Lone Wolf and Cub anime. Keep your fingers crossed. But that's just a possible future. A future that seems closer every day now that the new year is almost upon us. So, to close out 2019, let's take a look at a film that, quite honestly, I wanted to get to in Halloween, but life got in the way, so I'm doing it for New Year's. Tough. Till next time.